What happens when the world you escaped comes back to claim you? Ilara Vance was the family stain, the daughter who chose love over legacy and was ruthlessly cut off. For 8 years, she was a ghost to the powerful Vance dynasty, a single mum just trying to survive. But when her billionaire father, Arthur Vance, dies, she's summoned to the reading of his will. Her family, her cruel stepmother, and arrogant siblings are waiting like vultures, ready to pick the scraps and laugh her out of the room. They expected her to get nothing. They expected her to be a footnote. They never expected the lawyer to read one single, impossible line that would make them all freeze in terror. The steam from the industrial espresso machine hissed, fogging up the small window of The Daily Grind, a cafe tucked away on a nondescript street in Boston's Allston neighborhood. Ilara Vance wiped her hands on her apron, the coarse fabric a familiar comfort against the backdrop of a life defined by its sharp edges. At 29, she was the manager here, a title that sounded far grander than its reality, juggling schedules, placating cranky customers, and trying to fix the perpetually broken ice machine. Her world was small, but it was hers. It was a world that contained her 7-year-old son, Leo, a bright, asthmatic boy with a laugh that could shatter her worst moods. It was a world built on paycheck-to-paycheck budgeting, second-hand clothes, and the constant dull ache of exhaustion. It was a world that had absolutely no room for the Vances. She hadn't spoken her maiden name in 8 years. Not since she'd stood in her father's cavernous, oak-panelled study in the Beacon Hill mansion, the air thick with his disapproval. She was 21, pregnant, and in love with Liam, a musician with a kind heart and an empty bank account. Arthur Vance, a man who didn't so much build an empire as conquer one, had given her a simple choice. "That child," he'd said, his voice as cold as the marble fireplace, "will never be a Vance. And if you choose him, you will never be a Vance. You will have nothing." Ilara chose Liam. She chose Leo. They had 3 good years before a drunk driver took Liam, leaving Ilara a widow at 24. Since then, it had just been her and Leo surviving. The Vances, her father, Arthur, her stepmother, Beatrice, her brother, Marcus, and her sister, Serafina, had kept their promise. She was nothing to them, until today. The mail had come during the lunch rush. Tucked between a utility bill and a packet of coupons was an envelope that didn't belong. It was thick, creamy cardstock, impossibly expensive. Her name, Ms. Ilara Vance, was written in stark black calligraphy. The return address made her stomach clench. Blackwood, Finch and Associates, 75 State Street, Boston. She knew that name. It was her father's law firm, the one that handled every acquisition, every hostile takeover, every problem the Vance family needed to make disappear. She tore it open with trembling fingers. It was short, sterile, and brutal. "Dear Miss Vance, we regret to inform you of the passing of your father, Mr. Arthur B. Vance, on November 2nd. The formal reading of Mr. Vance's last will and testament is scheduled for Friday, November 7th at 10 Wackerhorse a.m. to be held at our offices. Your presence is required. Sincerely, Julian Blackwood, Esquatre." Her father was dead. Ilara felt a strange, hollow emptiness. Not grief, not yet. Just a cold, echoing shock. The man who had been a titan, an unmovable mountain of judgment and power, was just gone. "Your presence is required." A bitter laugh escaped her. Required. After 8 years of enforced silence, of unanswered letters and returned Christmas cards, her first instinct was to throw it away. What was the point? He'd made his decree. She would be humiliated. Beatrice, his impeccably cruel wife, would be there, draped in black silk and fake tears, flanked by her own 2 children. Marcus, the golden boy and heir apparent, would smirk. Serafina, who had married into even more money, would look at Ilara's worn-out jeans with manufactured pity. "Mama!" Leo was sitting at the small corner table she reserved for him after school, finishing his homework. He looked up, his brow furrowed with concern. "Are you sad?" She looked at her son. His inhaler was sitting on the table next to his math book. The chill of the coming winter was already making his breathing tight. The co-pay for his last emergency room visit had wiped out her savings. She wasn't going for a handout. She wasn't going for forgiveness. She was going because, for the first time in 8 years, she had been required. She would go, she would listen to them bequeath her a token dollar just to prove a point, and she would walk out with her head held high. It was, she realized, the only closure she would ever get. "No, sweetie," she said, forcing a small smile. "I'm not sad. I'm just thinking." She folded the letter and put it in her pocket. "Let's go home." The day of the reading was cold and grey, the Boston sky spitting a miserable drizzle. Ilara had spent $10 she didn't have on a black, second-hand consignment dress. It was simple, threadbare at the cuffs, but it was clean and respectful. When the elevator doors opened on the 40th floor lobby of Blackwood, Finch and Associates, she felt as if she'd stepped onto another planet. The air smelled like money, a faint, antiseptic scent of leather and old wood. A severe-looking receptionist directed her to the main conference room. She pushed open the heavy glass door. They were all there. Beatrice, 55, looking artfully devastated, in a custom-tailored black suit and a single, flawless string of pearls. Marcus, 32, every inch the new CEO, checking his phone with undisguised impatience. Serafina, 30, dabbing at perfectly dry eyes with a lace handkerchief. When they saw her, the quiet chatter stopped. "Ilara," Beatrice said, her voice dripping with the syrupy condescension Ilara remembered so well. "My dear, you came. How brave of you." "She knows which side her bread is buttered on," Marcus muttered, not even bothering to look up from his phone. "Probably hoping for a pity check." Serafina just stared, her eyes flicking from Ilara's sensible flat shoes to her simple dress. The judgment was as loud as a scream. "Hello, Beatrice. Marcus. Serafina," Ilara said, her voice quiet but firm. She took the only empty seat, at the far end of the massive mahogany table, as far from them as possible. A man at the head of the table stood. He was sharp, in his 60s, with wary eyes and a suit that cost more than Ilara's car. "Good morning. I am Julian Blackwood. I was Arthur's personal attorney and the executor of his estate." He opened a thick, leather-bound folder. "We shall begin." Julian Blackwood's voice was a dry monotone, a deliberate performance of neutrality that offered no comfort. He began with the minor bequests, the standard legal boilerplate that disposed of a life of staggering accumulation. "To my sister, Eleanor Vance Price," he read, "I bequeath a sum of $1 million. A sniffle from an Aunt Ilara barely remembered. "To my beloved wife, Beatrice Vance." Beatrice sat up, her mask of grief momentarily slipping into one of keen, avaricious expectation. "I bequeath the Vance property on Beacon Hill, the penthouse apartment in New York City, and the summer estate in Martha's Vineyard, along with all art, furnishings, and personal effects contained therein, to be hers for the duration of her natural life." Beatrice's smile was tight. It was a king's ransom in real estate, but Ilara noticed the phrasing, "for the duration of her natural life." They weren't hers to sell. They would revert to the estate upon her death, a gilded cage. "Additionally," Blackwood continued, Mrs. Vance will receive a stipend of $5 million. Beatrice's face paled. $5 million. It sounded like a lot, but to a woman who lived the life she did, it was an insult. It was a severance package, not an inheritance. "What?" Beatrice whispered, her voice sharp. "Julian, that must be a mistake. The company." "Please," Blackwood said, raising a hand. "I am not finished." He turned the page. "To my daughter, Seraphina Vance Croft, I bequeath my private art collection, valued at approximately $40 million, with the exception of the pieces held at the Beacon Hill residence." Seraphina let out a small, pleased sigh. She had her prize. "To my son, Marcus Vance." Marcus finally put his phone down, leaning forward. This was it. The keys to the kingdom. "I bequeath a sum of $10 million and my collection of classic automobiles." The silence in the room was absolute. Marcus's face went from pale to a deep, blotchy red. $10 million, he choked out. That's nothing. Where is the company? Where is Vance Industries? I am the CEO. The title of CEO was an appointment, Marcus, not a right of ownership, Blackwood said coolly. Your father was the sole owner of 100% of the voting shares. Then who gets them? Marcus shouted, slamming his hand on the table. Who gets the company? Beatrice? Seraphina hissed, turning on her stepmother. Did you do this? Did you convince him to sell it? Of course not, you fool, Beatrice snapped, her composure shattering. I assumed. Julian Blackwood cleared his throat. The sound cut through the rising panic. He adjusted his glasses and looked, for the first time, directly at Ilara. We now come, he said, his voice slow and deliberate, to the primary asset of the estate, Vance Industries, its subsidiaries, and all controlling shares therein. Ilara's heart hammered against her ribs. She felt invisible, a spectator at her own execution. She braced for the final insult, the symbolic $1, the cold mention of her disownment. Blackwood read, all my remaining assets, including my liquid capital, my investment portfolios, and my 100% controlling stake in Vance Industries. I leave to... He paused. The air crackled. My daughter, Ilara. Everyone froze. Beatrice made a small, strangled sound. Seraphina's perfectly manicured hand flew to her mouth. Marcus looked as if he'd been struck by lightning, his mouth open, his eyes wide with disbelief. Ilara just stared. It was a mistake, a cruel, elaborate joke. What did you say? Marcus whispered, his voice dangerously low. I leave to my daughter, Ilara, Blackwood repeated, his gaze locking with Marcus's. However, the inheritance of the company shares is subject to one binding condition. Ilara finally found her voice. Condition, she whispered. Yes, a significant one. Blackwood turned the page, the rustle of the paper sounding like a cannon shot in the small room. The will stipulates the following, he read, his voice gaining a new, sharp edge. Ilara Vance must assume the role of Chief Executive Officer of Vance Industries within 30 days of this reading. She must personally oversee the company's operations and maintain her position for a period of no less than 12 consecutive months. During this period, she is forbidden from selling or leveraging her controlling shares. He looked directly at Ilara. If, at the end of that 12-month period, the company has maintained or exceeded its current profitability index, the shares become hers, free and clear. If she refuses the position, or if she is removed from the position by the board, or if the company's profitability fatally collapses, the shares are to be immediately dissolved, and the entirety of Vance Industries is to be liquidated. Its assets will be distributed among several charities chosen by my father. The family will receive nothing. It wasn't an inheritance. It was a bomb. He had given her everything, but chained it to an impossible task. He'd made her the guardian of the entire Vance legacy, and in doing so, had placed an executioner's axe over everyone's head, including her own. If she failed, everyone, including her, would be ruined. No. Marcus's voice was a low growl. He stood up, his chair scraping violently against the floor. Absolutely not. I will contest this. She's a barista. She can't run a lemonade stand, let alone a multi-billion-dollar corporation. He was senile. He was incompetent. I can assure you, Marcus, Arthur was of perfectly sound mind when he signed this, Blackwood said, his voice like ice. I have the medical evaluations to prove it. He updated his will 6 months ago. It is ironclad. This is insane, Serafina cried, her face twisted in a mask of ugly rage. She gets everything, and we get table scraps. I'll fight this with Marcus. Beatrice was the most frightening. She was silent, her eyes fixed on Ilara. It was a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, a look that promised war. Ilara's head was spinning. CEO, 12 months, profitability. These words meant nothing to her. Miss Vance, Blackwood's voice cut through her panic. You have 30 days to accept the terms. If you do not formally accept by December 7th, the secondary clause, liquidation, will be triggered. The choice is yours. Marcus lunged across the table, his face inches from Ilara's. You will not do this, he hissed, his breath hot with fury. You will decline. Take your 10 million and walk away. She doesn't get 10 million, Marcus, Blackwood corrected calmly. The 10 million was your bequest. Ilara's bequest is the company. It's all or nothing. Marcus stared at her, his eyes promising a hell she couldn't even imagine. You will decline, he repeated, or I will destroy you. I will drag you through every court. I will prove you're an unfit mother. I will take your son. You will not take what is mine. Ilara looked at the 3 faces that had haunted her adult life. The 3 people who had watched her struggle, watched her grieve, and done nothing. They hadn't just ignored her. They had erased her. And now they were terrified of her. Her father had not given her a gift. He had given her a weapon, a test, and he had pointed it straight at the heart of the family that had betrayed them both. Ilara stood up, her legs shaking but holding. She looked at her brother, at the man who had just threatened her child. Mr. Blackwood, she said, her voice clear and cold, surprising even herself. Where do I sign? The 30 days passed in a blur of legal whiplash. Ilara's life was upended. She quit her job at the Daily Grind, a conversation that was both heartbreaking and surreal. She used a small emergency advance from the estate, managed by Blackwood, to hire a full-time nanny for Leo, a kind older woman named Mrs. Gable. She moved, not into the cold Beacon Hill mansion, but into a secure, sterile corporate apartment in the Seaport district, closer to the gleaming glass and steel monolith that was the Vance Industries headquarters. The entire time, a storm of legal motions raged around her. As promised, Marcus and Beatrice filed a joint motion to contest the will, citing undue influence and lack of capacity. It was laughed out of probate court. Julian Blackwood, as predicted, had been meticulous. He produced sworn affidavits from 3 separate neurologists and a psychiatrist, all dated the same day Arthur signed the will, all confirming his exceptionally sharp and strategic mind. The family's first attack had failed, so they retreated, readying for the real war. On December 7th, Ilara Vance, dressed in a stark, charcoal-grey suit that cost more than her last 3 months' rent, walked into the 50th floor boardroom. She was the CEO. The room was filled with the board of directors. It was a shark tank. 7 people, in addition to herself. There was Marcus, who retained his board seat as COO. There was Beatrice, who held a legacy seat Arthur had created for her years ago. There was Seraphina's husband, Lord Croft, who represented his own family's minority investment. That was the hostile bloc. Then there were the 3 independents, a retired banker, a tech CEO, and a man named David Chen, who had been Arthur's first ever hire, now serving as the head of logistics. Elara took the seat at the head of the table. The chair felt too big, the air too thin. Marcus began immediately, not even waiting for her to speak. "This is a farce," he announced to the table. "We are gathered here to welcome a CEO who, until last month, was serving lattes. Her qualifications are non-existent. She is a puppet, a placeholder for the lawyers to dismantle my father's legacy." "Marcus, that is enough," David Chen said, his voice quiet but carrying authority. He was in his late 60s, with a calm, observant face. "Is it, David?" Marcus shot back. "Are you comfortable with an amateur running this billion-dollar company? Her first act will be to run it into the ground, and then per the will we all lose our jobs. The liquidation clause makes her a threat to every single employee." He was good. He wasn't just appealing to their snobbery. He was appealing to their self-preservation. "Ms. Vance," the retired banker, Mr. Hemlock, said. "Mr. Vance has a coarse way of putting it, but his concern is valid. What exactly do you plan to do?" Elara's throat was dry. She had rehearsed a small, conciliatory speech. It suddenly felt hopelessly naive. "My plan," she said, her voice shaking slightly, "is to learn. I will be observing all departments for the first quarter, relying on the expertise of the existing leadership, including Mr. Vance." "Observing?" Marcus laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "We don't have time for you to observe. We are in the middle of a critical Q4 push. I am proposing an emergency motion. The board has the power to manage the CAO. I move that we limit the new CAO's oversight to ceremonial duties. All operational decisions will be routed through the COO, myself, to ensure continuity and prevent catastrophic damage." Beatrice seconded the motion instantly. A wise precaution. It was a coup. He was trying to sideline her on day 1, to make her a CEO in name only. If she couldn't make decisions, she couldn't affect profitability. He could run the company into the ground himself and blame her. "All in favor?" Marcus asked, his eyes gleaming. Beatrice, Lord Croft, and Mr. Hemlock raised their hands. That was 3. Marcus raised his. 4. The tech CEO and David Chen abstained, looking deeply uncomfortable. The vote was for Nero. Elara, as the subject of the motion, couldn't vote. She had been stripped of all power in less than 5 minutes. "The motion carries," Marcus declared, a triumphant smirk on his face. "Welcome to Vance Industries, Elara. Your new office is on the 48th floor. My assistant will show you. Try not to break anything." He and his allies swept out of the room. Elara was left sitting at the head of the table, humiliated, powerless, and utterly alone. The other 2 board members filtered out, offering her weak, sympathetic glances. She sat there for an hour, the silence of the boardroom ringing in her ears. She had failed, her father's impossible test, and she'd failed on the first day. Marcus would sabotage the company, the liquidation clause would trigger, and she and Leo would be left with less than nothing. The door opened. It was David Chen. He walked in, holding a small, black, lacquered box. He placed it on the table in front of her. "I was not sure when to give this to you," he said. "Mr. Blackwood gave it to me last month. He said your father instructed him to have it delivered to you after your first official failure. Ilara looked at him, confused. My first failure? Your father was a complicated man, Miss Vance. He was also a brilliant one. David motioned to the box. Open it. Her hands trembled as she lifted the lid. Inside there was no jewelry, no money. There was only a single, heavy, old-fashioned key and a sealed envelope. Her name was written on the front in her father's aggressive, slashing script. Ilara. She broke the seal. Ilara, if you are reading this, Marcus has taken his first shot, and you let him. You walked in there, expecting a fair fight. You expected a debate. The Vances do not debate. We win. You are weak. You were weak when you left, and you are weak now. You have your mother's heart, but you lack her spine. She was a fighter. I have given you the company not as a reward, but as a forge. I am testing you, to see if there is any of her steel left in you. Being CEO is not about speeches. It is about power, and power is only held by those willing to use it. You now hold 51% of the voting shares. The board cannot stop you from doing anything. Their little motion, it's symbolic. They can vote to sideline you, but you are the majority shareholder. You can fire the board. You can fire Marcus. You have the power of a king, but you are behaving like a pauper. The key is to my private office, not the public one Marcus now occupies. The real one. It is behind the bookshelf in the executive lounge on the 50th floor. Your mother designed it. It is the only place the walls are clean. Stop observing. Start fighting. Don't disappoint me again. A.V. It was not a letter of love. It was a roar of command. It was cold, it was brutal, and it was the first honest thing her father had said to her in a decade. Ilara closed the letter. The fear that had paralyzed her was replaced by a slow, burning, unfamiliar cold. It was rage. She looked at David Chen. Why did you stay with him, Mr. Chen? David permitted himself a small, sad smile. Your father was a tempest, but he was a brilliant one, and he respected loyalty. Your mother, she was the one who humanized him. When she died, the best part of him died with her. He pushed you away because you were the only person left who could hurt him. He paused. Marcus is your father's arrogance. Serafina is his vanity. But you, Ilara, you are his intellect. He just buried it under your mother's kindness. He's trying to see if it's still in there. Ilara stood up, clutching the key. Marcus may be the COO, she said, her voice no longer shaking. But I am the owner, and the owner doesn't need to observe. The owner needs to audit. What are you going to do? David asked. I'm going to find my real office, Ilara said. And then I'm going to read every single file my father left behind. Marcus wants to run the operations. Fine, I'll run the numbers. Let's see what he's been hiding. While Ilara descended into the digital catacomb of her father's private files, the family was busy digging up a different kind of dirt. Marcus was enraged. His boardroom victory had been hollow. Ilara had simply ignored the motion. Citing her rights as majority shareholder, she had begun a full-scale, top-to-bottom audit of every department, starting with operations, his department. She had bypassed the company's usual auditors, who were friendly to Marcus, and brought in an outside firm, one so ruthless and expensive that Marcus knew she wasn't bluffing. She wasn't just observing, she was hunting. She's pulling the P&L reports from the Singapore expansion, Marcus roared at Beatrice over dinner at the Beacon Hill mansion. The house felt like a tomb, its opulence a reminder of what they stood to lose. Let her, Beatrice said, swirling her wine. She was past the initial shock and had moved into cold, calculating strategy. She doesn't know how to read a P&L report, Marcus. She's a child playing dress-up. She'll bore of this. She's not alone, Marcus snapped. She has David Chen, and that law witch, Blackwood, is advising her. She's frozen my discretionary budget. Then you stop fighting her in the boardroom, Beatrice said, setting her glass down. You fight her where she's actually weak. What are you talking about? The boy, Beatrice said, her voice a silken whisper. Her son. Leo. Marcus paused. You want to go after the child? We don't go after him, Beatrice corrected. We simply paint a picture, a newly minted CEO working 80-hour weeks, a demanding, high-stakes job. Who, one wonders, is caring for that sickly little boy, a hired stranger? It sounds negligent. It sounds like the kind of thing that would concern Child Protective Services. It certainly sounds like grounds for an unfit mother clause. Marcus smiled, a slow, predatory expression. And if she's declared an unfit mother and loses custody? Who would be the logical guardian? Beatrice mused. His loving, concerned uncle? And as the guardian of her only heir, you would have significant control over her decision-making, or the stress of it all could cause her to have a breakdown. She'd be forced to step down, and the will clause would be triggered. It's beautiful, Marcus said. But we need proof. We need someone to build the case. I've already made a call, Beatrice said. His name is Gavin Thorne. He's a private investigator. He's not cheap, but he is thorough. Ilara, meanwhile, was drowning in spreadsheets. Her father's real office was a revelation. It was a Spartan, modern room, with a single desk and a wall of servers. For the last 3 weeks, she and a small team of forensic accountants from the new firm had been living there. David Chen acted as her translator, teaching her the language of business. This is a shell corporation, he'd explain, pointing to a line item. This is a soft expense. This is a vanity project. What's Vance Neuro? Ilara asked, pointing to a name that appeared over and over, always bleeding red. A disaster, David said, his face grim. It was Marcus's pet project, a neural interface technology. He poured 200 million into it over the last 3 years. Your father kept it alive. Some say to humor him, others, to let him hang himself with it. The R&D is a black hole. It has produced nothing. 200 million, Ilara breathed. And he's still funding it? The reports he gave the board said it was nearing profitability. Marcus has been cooking the books, Ms. Vance, David said. He's been shuffling assets from the logistics division, my division, to cover the losses from Neuro. He's gutting the company's most profitable sector to fund his fantasy. This was it. This was the weapon. This was what her father had known, what he'd left for her to find. But just as she felt the first glimmer of victory, the war shifted. She got a call from Mrs. Gable, her nanny. Ms. Vance, or I'm sorry to bother you at work, but there's a woman here, from the Department of Child Services. She says she's received an anonymous tip about Leo's welfare. Ilara's blood ran cold. She raced home, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She found a severe-looking woman in a government-issue suit, Ms. Diaz, sitting in her living room, taking notes. Ms. Vance, Ms. Diaz said, her tone neutral. I'm here to follow up on a report alleging child neglect. Neglect? Ilara felt the word like a slap. My son is the most important thing in the world to me. He is fed. He is clothed. He is loved. We received a report citing your new, high-stress job, your 80-hour work weeks, and the fact that you are leaving your asthmatic son in the care of a stranger for extended periods. We also have Photos. Ms. Diaz produced a small stack of 8x10 glossies. Ilara's stomach churned. There was a photo of her, taken through her office window, clearly late at night. A photo of Mrs. Gable pushing Leo on a swing in the park. A photo of Ilara, looking exhausted, getting into her car at dawn. And one, the worst one, of Leo, taken from a distance, having an asthma attack at a soccer game. Mrs. Gable was frantically administering his inhaler. The photo was framed to make it look like he was alone and in distress. This is a lie," Ilara stammered. "This is a fabrication. My nanny is a certified pediatric nurse. He had an attack, and she handled it." The report also alleges, Ms. Diaz continued, her eyes hard, that your late husband, Liam, had significant undisclosed debts. Gambling debts. Ilara froze. Liam, he had a problem, yes, but he'd promised he'd handled it before he died. That's not true. He had that under control. Our source provided evidence of outstanding markers to several unsavory establishments. The concern is that you, as the new head of a billion-dollar company, might be vulnerable to his creditors, that you might be tempted to embezzle to pay them off, that this financial distress is the real reason you're neglecting your son. It was a brilliant, vicious, and complete picture. They weren't just painting her as a bowed mother, they were painting her as a criminal. "This is my brother," Ilara whispered, the pieces clicking into place. "Marcus Vance. This is him. He's trying to take my company." Ms. Diaz sighed. "Ms. Vance, I don't care about your family feuds. I care about the boy. I am opening an official investigation into your custody of Leo Vance. You will be subject to scheduled and unscheduled home visits. I am assigning a caseworker. Until this is resolved, I would advise you to be very, very careful." Ilara walked Ms. Diaz to the door, her legs shaking so badly she could barely stand. She closed it, leaned against it, and slid to the floor, all the fight draining out of her. They weren't just attacking her company, they were coming for her son. Marcus had crossed a line. He thought this would make her weak, make her break. He had no idea what he had just unleashed. Ilara was terrified, but the fear quickly curdled into a white-hot, diamond-hard rage. They had used her son. They had used Liam. She went back to the office, but she wasn't Vance. She was a mother. "David," she said, walking into her father's hidden study, her eyes blazing. David Chen was there, as he always was, reviewing the audit data. "Ms. Vance, what's wrong?" he asked, alarmed at her expression. "Marcus and Beatrice sent Child Protective Services to my home. They hired a PI. They're accusing me of neglect and claiming I'm a financial risk because of my late husband's gambling debts." David's face, normally so placid, hardened. "Gavin Thorne," he said instantly. "You know him?" "I know of him," David said with distaste. "Your father used him once, years ago, to handle a delicate acquisition. Thorne doesn't just find dirt, he creates it. This is Beatrice's signature, not Marcus's. It's too clever." "It doesn't matter who," Ilara said, her voice shaking with controlled fury. "They're trying to take Leo. They think this will force me to step down. They're wrong. This forces me to win. Right now." "Ilara," David said, using her first name for the first time. "The audit of Vance Neuro is complete. It's worse than we thought. Marcus hasn't just been covering his losses. He's been falsifying R&D reports to the board and to our private investors, specifically to Lord Croft, Seraphina's husband. He's been lying to his own brother-in-law? Croft's family invested $50 million in Neuro, believing it was on the verge of a breakthrough. According to these files, the project has been defunct for 6 months. The lead scientist quit. Marcus has been pocketing the R&D budget. He's not just incompetent, Ilara breathed. He's embezzling. This is enough to remove him from the board. It's enough to press criminal charges, David said. No, not yet, Ilara said, a cold, sharp plan forming in her mind. A criminal charge would send the company into a death spiral. The press would destroy us. The profitability clause would be impossible to meet. I'd lose the company anyway. This isn't about jail. This is about control. She looked at the name on the report. Lord Croft. Seraphina's husband, Ilara mused. He's on the board. He voted with Marcus to sideline me. He believes Marcus is making him money, David said. It's time, Ilara said, to show him the truth. Lord James Croft was a man who prized, above all else, his family's ancient name and an unbroken line of financial successes. He viewed his wife, Seraphina, as a beautiful, if vapid, accessory, and his brother-in-law, Marcus, as a brash, useful attack dog. He had no opinion of Ilara at all, which is why he was so surprised when she requested a private meeting, not at the office, but at the Lanesborough, a discreet, old money club where business was done over scotch, far from prying eyes. He arrived to find her alone in a private study, a single file on the table in front of her. "Miss Vance," he said stiffly, not sitting. "I have little time." "Lord Croft," Ilara replied, her voice perfectly even. "I won't waste it. You voted against me at the board meeting because you believe I am a threat to your investment. You are incorrect. I am not the threat. My brother is. Marcus is boorish, but he's effective," Croft said dismissively. "Vance Neuro is a visionary project." "Vance Neuro is a shell," Ilara said. She pushed the file across the table. "It's been defunct for 184 days, to be precise. The lead scientist, Dr. Orris, is now working for our chief competitor in Berlin. The last 12 million in R&D funding, 5 million of which came from your family's investment, was wired by Marcus to a personal holding company in the Cayman Islands." Croft's practiced aristocratic boredom vanished. He snatched the file and tore it open. His face went white as he read the wire transfer receipts, the falsified R&D reports, and the resignation letter from Dr. Aris, which detailed, in scathing terms, Marcus's complete and total fraud. He stole from me," Croft whispered, his voice trembling with a truly aristocratic rage. "He stole from the company," Ilara corrected. "He stole from our father's legacy. He stole from you." Croft looked up, his eyes narrow. "What do you want?" "You are part of the hostile bloc on the board," Ilara said. "You, Beatrice, and Mr. Hemlock. You follow Marcus's lead. I am calling an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. I am going to call for a vote of no confidence in Marcus Vance as COO, and a vote to remove him from the board of directors entirely." "Beatrice will never vote against her son," Croft said. "Hemlock is too afraid of Marcus." "Beatrice's vote won't matter, and Mr. Hemlock is a banker. He fears instability more than he fears Marcus. He will vote with the winning side. Right now, the hostile bloc is you, Beatrice, Hemlock, and Marcus. That's 4 votes against me, David Chen, and the tech CEO. 4-3. You are the swing vote, Lord Croft." She leaned forward. "Tomorrow, when I present this file, you have a choice. You can side with the thief who defrauded your family and go down with him. Or you can side with me. You can help me stabilize this company, protect your investment, and ensure the person who stole from you is dealt with." Croft closed the file. He stood there for a long time. "He humiliated me. He lied to my wife, to my family." "Yes," Ilara said. "Tomorrow at 9 a.m. Croft said, his voice like flint. "You will have my vote, and I will make sure Hemlock understands what is at stake." "One more thing," Ilara said, as he turned to leave. "My sister. Does Serafina know about this?" "My wife," Croft said, his voice cold, "knows only what I deem appropriate." Ilara had her first ally. The ambush was set. The emergency board meeting was convened at 9 a.m. sharp. The tension in the room was so thick, Ilara felt she could barely breathe. Marcus strode in, looking smug. He clearly believed he was the one who had called the meeting, or that Ilara was caving. "Ilara, I'm glad you've come to your senses," he started. "I assume this is to tender your resignation. A wise choice. Given the unfortunate new information about your personal life, I'm sure." "This meeting," Ilara said, her voice cutting through his like a steel blade, "is not about my resignation. It is about yours." The color drained from Marcus's face. "What did you say?" Beatrice looked alarmed. "Ilara, dear, the stress is clearly getting to you." "I am calling for an immediate vote of no confidence in our Chief Operating Officer, Marcus Vance, and his immediate removal from the Board of Directors, pending a full investigation into financial malfeasance." A gasp from Hemlock. Serafina, who had insisted on attending with her husband, let out a nervous laugh. "Don't be ridiculous, Ilara. You can't just—" "I can," Ilara said. She looked at Julian Blackwood, who was present as legal counsel. "Mr. Blackwood, am I within my rights as majority shareholder?" "You are, Ms. Vance," Blackwood confirmed, his face impassive. "This is baseless," Marcus roared. "You have no proof. This is slander. I'll sue you into oblivion." "Will you?" Ilara said. She nodded to David Chen, who began to distribute a new, thicker file to every board member. "Then I suggest you review the audit of the Vance Neuro Project, or, as I've come to call it, the Marcus Vance Slush Fund." Marcus's eyes darted to the file, and he froze. He knew. "You will find," Ilara said, her voice strong and steady, "that Mr. Vance has systematically defrauded this company and its investors for 3 years. He has falsified R&D reports, covered his losses by gutting our most profitable division, and as of 6 months ago, has been embezzling funds directly into a personal shell company." "Lies!" Marcus yelled, but there was panic in his voice. "Lord Croft," Ilara said, turning her gaze to him. "You were a primary investor in Neuro. Would you care to comment on the findings?" James Croft looked at his brother-in-law, his face a mask of cold fury. "I find the report credible," he said, his voice clipping the words. "I find the wire transfers to the Kaiman Holdings entity particularly credible. I believe," he said, looking at the rest of the board, "that Ms. Vance has just saved this company from a thief." Serafina looked horrified. "James, what are you saying? It's Marcus." "Be quiet, Serafina," Croft snapped. Beatrice was on her feet. "This is a family matter. This is a betrayal. You are destroying your fathers." "My father," Ilara interrupted, her voice ringing with authority, "left me this company to protect it, and I am protecting it from him." She looked at Marcus. He was trapped, sweating, pale, his smugness completely gone, replaced by the terrified look of a cornered animal. "But this," Ilara said, her voice dropping, "is just the corporate malfeasance. There is also the personal side." She threw a stack of photos onto the table. They were the photos from the PI. "There is the matter," Ilara said, her voice trembling with a rage she no longer tried to hide, "of the anonymous, baseless tips to Child Protective Services. The hiring of a disreputable private investigator named Gavin Thorne to stalk my child. The attempt to fabricate a story about my late husband to gain leverage. The attempt to use my son, my 7-year-old son, as a pawn in a corporate takeover. Beatrice's face went chalky white. She, at last, was silent. "You didn't just try to steal from the company, Marcus," Ilara said, her voice a low, dangerous whisper. "You came after my son. You thought that made me weak. But a mother protecting her child is the most dangerous thing on this planet." She stood at the head of the table. She was no longer the ignored daughter. She was the matriarch. "The motion stands, all in favor of the immediate removal of Marcus Vance from the board and from his position as COO. Ilara raised her hand. David Chen raised his hand. The tech CEO, her eyes wide with shock at the revelations, raised her hand. Lord Croft raised his hand. Mr. Hemlock, the banker, seeing the tide turn so completely, slowly raised his hand. It was 5-2. Beatrice and Marcus were the only dissenters. "The motion carries," Ilara declared. "Marcus Vance is removed, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building." Marcus stared at her, his face a grotesque mask of hatred and disbelief. You bitch!" he spat. "You will never hold this. I will burn it to the ground before I let you have it." "You already tried," Ilara said coldly. "Security." Two large men who had been waiting outside the door entered. They took Marcus by the arms. He didn't fight. He was a deflated balloon, all his arrogance gone. He just stared at Ilara as they dragged him out. The door shut. Beatrice was next. She was shaking, but with fury, not fear. "You think you've won? You think this is over? You are still just a girl in a borrowed suit. You have no idea the enemies you've just made." "I know exactly who my enemies are," Ilara said, sitting down. "They're the people who would threaten a child to get what they want. You hold a legacy seat on this board, Beatrice, but you have no power. You will sit here and you will watch me save this company. You will watch me succeed. And if you ever come near my son again, I will not be as kind as I was to Marcus. I won't just fire him. I will press criminal charges. Am I understood?" Beatrice looked at the faces around the table. No one would meet her gaze. Not even her own son-in-law. She was finished. She sank back into her chair, defeated. Ilara looked at the remaining, stunned board members. "Now," she said, "all business. Let's talk about stabilizing the logistics division and hiring a new, competent COO." The 6 months that followed were the hardest of Ilara's life. They were also the most rewarding. The removal of Marcus had sent a shockwave through the company. The Vance Neuro scandal was contained. Ilara, Croft, and Blackwood had handled it internally. Marcus was given a severance that was, in reality, a non-disclosure agreement binding him to silence in exchange for Ilara not filing criminal charges. He and Serafina, whose husband now held her on a very tight leash, retreated to Europe, humiliated. Beatrice was a ghost. She still attended board meetings, as her seat required, but she never spoke. She was a silent, beautifully dressed statue of malice. Ilara, with David Chen, now promoted to her official senior advisor, worked 18-hour days. She wasn't just learning, she was leading. She discovered she had her father's head for numbers, and, more importantly, her mother's instinct for people. She gutted the toxic management Marcus had installed. She flew to Singapore and personally renegotiated the contracts he had botched. She shut down the failing vanity projects and rerouted all that capital into R&D for the company's core products. She met with division heads, with factory foremen, with shipping managers. She listened. The CPS case against her was dropped. Miss Diaz, after 2 follow-up visits, saw a happy, thriving child and a mother who, despite her insane schedule, was fiercely present. The anonymous tip was refiled as malicious and false. Gavin Thorne, facing an investigation of his own from Blackwood's firm, had disappeared. The company, which had been bleeding, stabilized. The Q2 reports showed a modest profit. Q3 showed significant growth. Ilara Vance was winning. The day of the 12-month anniversary of her first board meeting, she walked into the boardroom. The 12 months were up. "Mr. Blackwood," she said. Julian Blackwood stood, a rare, small smile on his face. "Ladies and gentlemen of the board, as per the will of Arthur Vance, Ilara Vance has served as CEO for 12 consecutive months. The auditor's reports are final. Vance Industries has not just maintained profitability, it has exceeded the index by 4.05%. He turned to Ilara. "Ms. Vance, the conditions of the will have been met. The 100% controlling shares of Vance Industries are now yours, free and clear, to do with as you wish." A small, polite applause went around the table, led by David Chen and Lord Croft. Beatrice just stared at her. "Thank you, everyone," Ilara said. "My first act as an unconditional owner is to table a motion." She looked straight at her stepmother. "I move to dissolve the legacy board seat currently held by Beatrice Vance, and to remove her from this board." Beatrice's head snapped up. You can't." "I can," Ilara said. "I am the 100% shareholder. My vote is the only one that matters. The motion carries. Beatrice, you are removed, effective immediately. You are no longer associated with this company in any way. Furthermore, the Beacon Hill residence and the Vineyard estate, which, per the will, were yours for life, provided you remained a non-disruptive part of the Vance legacy, are now forfeit. Their upkeep is a drain on the estate, and as the head of the estate, I am cutting the expense. You have 30 days to vacate." Beatrice looked for the first time truly terrified. Where will I go?" "The stipend." "The 5 million is yours, as stipulated," Ilara said, her voice devoid of emotion. "I suggest you learn to budget." I did. Beatrice stood, shaking, her mask of composure finally cracking to reveal the desperate, grasping woman beneath. She looked at Ilara with a lifetime of hatred. "You are just like him," she whispered, her voice venomous. "You're as cold and as cruel as he ever was." "No," Ilara said, standing to face her. "I'm not. He cut me off and left me with nothing. I'm letting you keep $5 million. The difference is, my father did it to be cruel. I'm doing it to be free. Free of you, free of Marcus, free of this whole toxic, broken family. Now get out of my boardroom." Beatrice fled. 1 month later, Ilara stood on the sidewalk outside the Beacon Hill mansion. A moving truck was pulling away. Beatrice was gone. The house was empty. Ilara walked through the cold, cavernous rooms where she had been so unhappy. She walked into her father's study, the public one. David Chen was with her. "What will you do with it?" he asked. "It's a beautiful property." "It's a mausoleum," Ilara said. "It's full of ghosts. I'm selling it, all of it. The house, the New York penthouse, the Vineyard estate. I'm donating the art Serafina didn't take to a museum. My mother's favorite pieces." "And the company?" "We're moving headquarters," Ilara said. "Out of that glass tower. I bought a new building, a converted warehouse in the seaport. More light, more collaboration, and I'm starting a new charitable foundation." "Oh?" "The Liam Vance Foundation," Ilara said, a small, sad smile on her face. For families struggling with medical debt and gambling addiction, she was turning the poison of her past into medicine. That evening, she was not in a cold mansion or a sterile apartment. She was in a new home, a warm, light-filled brownstone in Brookline, with a small backyard for Leo. She was tucking him into bed. "Did you win at work, Mama?" he asked sleepily. "Yes, sweetie," she whispered, kissing his forehead. "I did. We won." Later that night, she sat by her own fireplace, holding the last thing from her father's hidden office. It was a second letter, which David had given her from Blackwood after the final board meeting. It had been taped to the bottom of the same black box. She opened it. "Ilara, if you are reading this, you won. I knew you would. I didn't do this to be cruel. I did this because I had failed you. I let Beatrice and Marcus poison my house. I let my pride poison my heart. I saw your mother's soft heart in you, and I was terrified the world would break you, just as it broke her. So I broke you first. I cut you off. I let you struggle. I had to see if you would find your mother's steel. I had to know if you were strong enough to carry the weight of what I had built. Liam's debts. I paid them off the day after his funeral. All of them. I knew you were never at risk. I just needed to see what Marcus and Beatrice would do if they thought you were. They didn't disappoint. You are not me, Ilara. You are better. You have my mind, but you have your mother's soul. The company was never the prize. It was the weapon. It was the forge. You were the prize, my only true legacy. Be happy. Be strong. Be the Vance your mother always knew you were." Dad Ilara cried. For the first time she cried, not for the father she had lost, but for the one she had, in the strangest, most painful way, finally found. She was no longer the ignored single mum. She was the CEO, the matriarch, and the survivor. And she was, finally, free. Ilara Vance didn't just inherit a company, she inherited a battle. She was underestimated, attacked, and pushed to the brink, not just by her rivals, but by her own family. They tried to use her past against her. They tried to use her child against her. But they forgot one crucial thing. Never, ever underestimate a mother fighting for her son's future. She didn't just win the war. She rewrote the rules and built a new legacy from the ashes of the old one. What do you think of Ilara's father? Was his cruel test a brilliant act of love or an unforgivable betrayal? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We spend a lot of time finding and bringing you these incredible stories of justice and dramatic revenge. If you want to hear more stories like this, please show your support by hitting that like button. Don't forget to share this video with someone who needs to see that the underdog can win. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel and ring that bell so you never miss a single moment of karmic retribution. Thanks for listening.